The engine explodes at 31,000 feet. The pilot is unconscious. 180 passengers scream. The plane starts to drop from the sky. Then Black Hawk helicopters lock on to a strange frequency. A small voice, calm and clear, says, "This is Phoenix. I have control of the aircraft." It is a 12-year-old girl. One pilot in the Black Hawk freezes. That call sign, Phoenix, belonged to his old flight instructor. She died 3 years ago. Before you watch the full story, tell me in the comments which country you are watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories like this. Grace Miller sat in seat 21A, next to the window. She was small for 12, with short curly hair and a green backpack between her feet. Inside that backpack was an old flight logbook. It had belonged to her father, Captain Daniel Miller, a former Air Force pilot. He had died in a training accident 4 years ago. Grace was flying alone to Denver to spend the summer with her aunt. She had flown many times before, always alone, always quiet, always watching the pilots walk past her seat like she wished she could follow them into the cockpit. Her father used to say one thing to her every single day before he died. "Grace, the sky does not care if you are scared. It only cares if you know what to do." He had trained her since she was 6 years old, not in a real plane, but on an old flight simulator he kept in the garage. Hour after hour, he taught her the switches, the checklists, the sounds an engine makes when something is wrong. She thought it was just a game they played together. She did not know it was preparation. The flight was smooth for the first 40 minutes. Grace was drawing a small airplane in her notebook when she heard it. A strange grinding noise from the right engine. It got louder, then higher, like metal screaming. Her whole body went stiff. She knew that sound. She had heard it once on her father's training recordings, late at night, over and over, until she could pick it out in her sleep. Then it happened. A loud bang shook the plane. Passengers screamed. Bags fell from the overhead bins. Oxygen masks dropped and swung in the air. The plane tilted hard to the right. Grace looked out her window and saw black smoke pouring from the engine. Part of the metal cover was gone. Flames flickered orange against the wing. A flight attendant ran down the aisle, trying to calm people down, but her own hands were shaking. The intercom crackled, but no one answered from the cockpit. Not once. Not twice. Silence. Grace's mind went quiet in a strange way. Not calm exactly, but focused, the same way she felt when her father used to test her late at night. She thought about what he taught her. Engine failure plus no answer from the pilots equals something is very wrong up front. She unbuckled her seatbelt. "Sweetheart, sit down," an old man next to her said, gripping her arm gently. Grace looked at him and said, "I think I can help. My dad was a pilot. He taught me." The man did not believe her, but he let go, because what else could he do? Grace walked up the aisle, holding onto the seats as the plane shook. A flight attendant named Carol stopped her at the front. "Honey, go back to your seat, please." Grace looked up at her, and something in her eyes was not the look of a scared child. "Ma'am, both pilots are not answering. Someone has to check. I know how to read the instruments. My father trained me for years. Please, just let me look." Carol hesitated. She glanced back at the terrified faces filling the cabin, then at the closed cockpit door, then back at this small girl standing steady even as the floor tilted beneath them. She made a choice she would think about for the rest of her life. She opened the door. Inside, the captain was slumped forward, unconscious, a cut on his forehead from hitting the control panel during the explosion. The first officer was awake but dazed, blood running down the side of his face, his hands shaking too badly to hold the controls steady. Warning lights flashed red across the panel. The plane was descending fast, banking to the right, fighting against itself. The first officer looked at Grace through blurry eyes. "Kid, Get out, this isn't. His voice faded. He was losing consciousness from the head injury. Grace climbed into the empty seat beside him. She was too short to see over the panel properly, so Carol grabbed 2 seat cushions and shoved them under her. Grace's hands found the controls, and for a moment, she just froze, staring at real blood, real warning lights, a real dying man beside her instead of a game in a garage. Then she heard her father's voice in her memory, the same words he said every single night before bed. Grace, when you are scared, that is exactly when your training has to take over. Don't think. Just do what I taught you. She reached for the radio with shaking fingers and pressed the button. Mayday, Mayday. This is Skyline Flight 447. Both pilots are down. I am a passenger. I have the controls. Repeat, I have the controls. There was silence on the other end, then a confused voice. Flight 447, please confirm, who is speaking? Grace took a breath. My name is Grace Miller. I am 12 years old. My father was Captain Daniel Miller. He trained me on flight simulators since I was 6. I know this aircraft. Please, I need help landing this plane. 30 miles away, 2 Black Hawk helicopters were already in the air on a training exercise. When the emergency call came through, they were ordered to intercept and guide the aircraft toward the nearest runway. The lead pilot, Major Ethan Cole, adjusted his headset when he heard the name. Did she say Miller? He asked his co-pilot. Major Cole had trained under Daniel Miller years ago at flight school. He remembered a photo Daniel once showed him of a little girl sitting in a homemade cockpit made of cardboard and old switches, grinning with 2 missing teeth. He remembered Daniel saying, I'm going to make sure she never feels helpless, no matter what happens to me. Major Cole keyed his radio. Flight 447, this is Black Hawk lead. I flew with your father. He was one of the best pilots I ever knew. I'm going to talk you down, step by step. Can you do that with me? Grace's voice cracked, just slightly. Yes, sir. Please help me. For the next 20 minutes, Major Cole guided her through everything. He told her how to level the wings, how to slow the descent, how to work with only one working engine. Grace repeated every instrument reading back to him exactly the way her father trained her, calm, clear, precise. The passengers behind her had gone quiet, watching a child's small hands hold the fate of the plane. Somewhere over row 14, a mother pulled out her phone and searched the name Grace had given over the radio. Captain Daniel Miller. A photo appeared, a man in uniform, smiling beside a fighter jet. Word spread through the cabin in whispers. The girl in the cockpit was his daughter. As the runway came into view, Major Cole's voice stayed steady in Grace's ear. You're doing perfect, Phoenix. Just like your father used to call you. Grace blinked in surprise. She had never told him that nickname. Her father used to call her Phoenix because, he said, no matter how many times she fell during training, she always got back up and tried again. At 500 feet, Grace's hands trembled on the controls. What if I crash it? What if I'm not good enough? She whispered into the radio. Major Cole answered without hesitation. Your father spent years making sure you were ready for this exact moment. Trust him. Trust yourself. The wheels touched the runway hard, bounced once, then settled. Grace pressed the brakes with all her strength, her whole body pushing down, until finally, the plane rolled to a stop with the runway still stretching ahead of them. For 3 seconds, there was total silence. Then the cabin erupted into cheering, crying, clapping. Grace sat frozen in the seat, shaking, tears finally falling as the fear she had been holding back came pouring out at once. Emergency crews rushed the plane. The captain and first officer were taken away for treatment, both expected to recover. Passengers stopped to look at the small girl being helped out of the cockpit, some hugging her, some simply staring in disbelief that a child had just saved their lives. News of the landing spread within hours. Reporters called it a miracle. But Grace did not want interviews. She wanted her father. That night, sitting with her aunt, she opened his old logbook one more time and found a page she had never noticed before, tucked near the back. In his handwriting, dated years earlier, it said, "If anything ever happens to me, I hope Grace remembers this. She is ready for anything. I made sure of it." Grace closed the book and held it to her chest. She finally understood why he trained her every single night, why he never let her skip a lesson, why he called her his little phoenix. He had not just been playing a game with her. He had been preparing her for a moment neither of them ever wanted to happen, but one he made sure she would survive. A week after the landing, Major Cole came to visit Grace and her aunt. He sat down across from her, still in his uniform, and placed a small box on the table. Inside was a set of silver wings, the same kind her father used to wear on his flight suit. "These were his," Major Cole said quietly. "He gave them to me the day he finished flight school, as a joke, so I would never forget him. I think it's time they went back to his family." Grace held the wings in her palm, feeling their weight. "He never told me he trained you too," she said. Major Cole smiled. "He trained a lot of us. But none of us knew he was training someone even better back home." Grace laughed through her tears for the first time since the crash. Reporters kept calling for weeks, wanting interviews, wanting photos, wanting to make her famous. Grace said no to almost all of them. She did not want to be famous. She only wanted to fly, the way her father had taught her, quietly, patiently, one lesson at a time. Her aunt understood, and made sure the world gave Grace the space she needed to grieve and to heal. A year later, Grace was 13, standing on a small airfield with Major Cole beside her, learning to fly a real training plane for the first time. As the engine started, she smiled and whispered the same words her father always told her. "The sky does not care if you are scared. It only cares if you know what to do." And high above the clouds, Grace Miller kept flying, carrying her father's lessons with her every single time she took the controls.